you have to look into the past to foresee what modern India is going to be all about. If you look at modern India from the prism of certain books that we all know to be true. I was having a very interesting conversation with the Ami. She corrected me. Her name is Ami, not Amy. It's AMI, which is also very interesting. And she told me a few things about Mahabharata and Ramayana. I'll get to that in just a minute. We have Mr. Bhuvan Lal also here with us. I met him offline as well. I'll start with you, Mr. Lal. What do you think of this, this paradigm that books are basically a window or a door into an ecosystem which basically reveals the truth about certain aspects as they cannot be seen without these books? Is it a complicated question that I ask you?
Not at all. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this event. I must compliment the Khaitan Foundation and NewsX for having the vision and the foresight of encouraging this kind of exchange of ideas. India in the 21st century is a global force. We are not only the largest democracy in the world, we are the largest democracy in the history of the world. In 2047, 1.73 billion people will have the passport that everyone in the world will want, an Indian passport.
Applause for that, please. Applause for that.
And there are many reasons for that. And the primary reason is our history. We belong to a civilization that 5,000, maybe 10,000 years ago was far more evolved than the rest of our planet. And we brought ideas that have lived for centuries, over many, many kings and emperors. The idea of meditation, the idea of yoga, the idea of oneness. And this got distilled into our freedom movement. The foremost fighters of freedom are revolutionaries. Men like Lala Hardayal, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, they sacrificed everything so that we could sit one day in a free country and have a festival of ideas. We could vote. When India goes to vote, they've been talking about 2024 since morning. When we go to vote next year, ladies and gentlemen, it will be the biggest election again on planet Earth and in the history of human civilization. We have won wars. We have defended our borders. We have now, at this moment, at a very proud moment, seen our scientists deliver a promise, and they have put us on the moon. So when you ask me this sort of a question, we don't have the time for 4 speakers to speak on such a long discussion. So I can go on for another hour, but I would like Amy to speak first. So you have a microphone.
Right, let me correct you. Her name is Ami.
Ami. I'm extremely sorry.
I was corrected some time ago. Ami, coming to you.
Actually, it's Ami, not Ami. It's Ami.
Ami, okay.
It's a Gujarati word.
Like the Bangla Ami?
It's a Gujarati Ami. So by Ami in Bangla is me. Ami in Gujarati is Amrit. So it's...
Okay. Well, we were speaking offline right before this started, and you told me that modern India basically also has to look at things that stand to be rectified. And one of those things that perhaps that have to be rectified for modern India to embrace its culture, its pedigree, is some of our sacred texts, like Mahabharata and the Ramayana. You mentioned some excerpts out of the Mahabharata that aren't true. That's fascinating. It's very fascinating to me that Duryodhan never fell into that pond. He was never called Andhe ka putra, Andha by Draupadi. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, do you think that this is going to be the awakening, the enlightenment towards modern India through books?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you the reason for that, starting from what sir was saying, yeah? He spoke about yoga, he spoke about meditation. He said we have a history which goes back 5,000, 7,000 years, maybe even more. You know, there's one concept that has allowed us to do all these things in the past. आप सबने धर्म ये शब्द सुना है ना? और आजकल हम कहते हैं हम तो धर्म निरपेक्ष हो गए. But you know what does this word dharma mean? Dharma का definition is very different from religion. It means धारयति इति धर्म, धारणात् धर्मिति आहु, धर्मो धारयति प्रजा, यः स्यात् धारण संयुक्तम, सह धर्म इति निश्चयः.
Very nice.
धर्म वो है जो धारण करता है, और क्योंकि वो धारण करता है वो धर्म है. What is धारण करना? To uphold and to sustain. That is the dharma principle. Sustainability is dharma. आज हम sustainability की बात करते हैं. Sustainability is not a new concept. आज everybody talks about corporate sustainability ये वो. But the very underlying philosophy of our culture has been sustainability. That has been a part of all the activities that we do. तब से इसीलिए हम nature की पूजा करते हैं, है ना? हम नदियों की पूजा करते हैं. It was not just puja. It was about how do you live together symbiotically with all jivas, right? तो that was the underlying theme. अब हम वो धर्म का अर्थ ही भूल गए हैं, right? और धर्म का अर्थ हम केवल religion तक सीमित रखते हैं. That is true for our itihas as well. We somehow think that...
But do you think all texts, sacred or not, that people live by have to be revisited from time to time?
Absolutely.
The Bible has been written at least 20 times.
Well, the ideas were different, right? So Bible has been rectified, written multiple times to take away some of the things which they felt were not palatable with the current times.
So they were catching up to the times.
Right. However, I think for us, the ulta has happened. A lot of things have been retold and revisited based on just kahi suni baatein, not really based on facts. So I'll just talk about the point you mentioned, right?
So not much of a difference between hearsay and heresy.
Absolutely. Well, I would say heresy has never been a part of our culture, and that is why heresy has spread like a wildfire, I would say. However, I think it's not too late. We need to go back and understand the text for what they are. Again, why? Because what has been the purpose? Dharma, as I said, is sustainability. Itihasa, for which we have Mahabharata and Ramayana, are meant for a reason.
Okay.
To give us the lessons of life. And to get the right lessons, we need to know itihas for what it is, rather than from an entertainment perspective. And you mentioned it, so I'll just finish it over there. तो हम सब अधिकतर लगता है, अगर मैं किसी को भी पूछूं ना महाभारत क्यों हुआ, so they'll tell me द्रौपदी की वाणी, अंधे का पुत्र अंधा बोल दिया उसने, right? But actual महाभारत जो व्यास जी रचित महाभारत है, और उसकी कोई भी मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट में there is no अंधे का पुत्र अंधा. Did Duryodhan fall? Yes. But did Draupadi call him that? No. The yuddha was not because of andhe ka putra andha. The yuddha was, we know very clearly, the matsarya, the ahankar of Duryodhan, which does not allow him to settle even for 5 gaons, which the Pandavas have asked for, right? So now when that changes, when the facts, what we think are facts, change, the lesson we take out from it is very different. And yes, absolutely, I think we need to go back to what the original source says, not to rectify it, but to know it for what it is.
Okay. Suhail, you're in the thick, you're in the mixture of, you're on that cusp of basically seeing a transition of how books were written, how authors were approached, and how authors went about writing their material a few decades ago. Now the game has entirely changed, and you're in the mix of it. Do you think that modern India perhaps also needs to have authors who have a modern outlook towards taking India to that direction? I mean, a lot of these adaptations that we talk about, a lot of these conversions that happen from books to screenplays are all becoming the backbone of what authors usually try and focus on, especially the fiction ones. But do you think that that's something which is going to benefit modern India through authors?
Thank you so much for the question, Vineet. I think, the topic is very interesting because books can tell you what modern India is about, but today, modern India or contemporary India can also tell you what books are about, because there's been a huge shift from what Indian authors had in terms of opportunity 20 years ago to what they have right now. And that is, as I said, opportunity. I've always said that Indian authors never have a dearth of talent. They always have a dearth of opportunity. And 20 years ago, if you wrote a book, there were 3 or 4 major publishing houses. If they took up the book, it was published. But, if they didn't, then there was no avenue for you to write. So now today, a lot of people may say that, well, on a lighter note, that there are more authors than readers, or, the book sales have gone down drastically, or the yardstick for a book
I'll just watch it when it comes on Netflix. Why read it?
So or the yardstick for a book to become a bestseller has reduced. But the point is that the Indian reader now has a plethora of genres to choose from, because there are books written in romance, historical fiction, mythology, fantasy, war, true crime, sports, and that is because, Indian authors have that special ability to write across. I always say that, my youngest author is a 91-year-old gentleman, and my oldest author is a 13-year-old girl from New Delhi. So what that shows us that with so many publishing houses opening up, the range of age is also widening. People can write. There is an author of mine. He had written a book in 1986 when he was in the 6th standard, and he had written it in his notebook. And he had done nothing about it because there weren't any publishing avenues. He eventually became the producer of Savdhan India, and I came in contact with him. And he told me about this book. I said, bring it on, let's do it. And almost 35, 40 years after he wrote that, it eventually came out as a book and became a bestseller. So that is the transition that we are seeing. And I think, Indian authors are second to none. I was at a recent book launch and somebody asked this question, that what do you feel, with respect to thrillers? Are Indian authors better or are Western authors better? And well, I just told them about a book that I'm currently working on, and it's based on a true case. In the early part of the 1900s, there was a murder that took place in a hill station in India. And it was a closed-door murder. So it wasn't solved because the lady had retired to her room, but there was no window inside, and she was found murdered. There was a gentleman who was at that hill station, and he found this case very interesting. And he thought he must find out a little more. His name was Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling called up a friend of his who used to be very interested in, detective work, and he said that, look, he called up England and he said, look, there is this case which I think you should definitely look into because, it's not being solved. That gentleman, the one he called up, was a person called Arthur Conan Doyle. Arthur Conan Doyle said that, look, I'm too old, I can't travel to India, but there's this young girl who comes to me to take notes to understand how it all works. She might be a good option. And that lady was Agatha Christie. So the point is that the first book that Agatha Christie did, which was The Mysterious Affair at Styles, is actually based on that particular case. So if not for India and its stories, the greatest of Western authors would not even have found material to write their first book.
Very fascinating. Very interesting. Yeah, right. Very fascinating, and in fact, that takes you deep inside the mind of an author and how interesting things can get if pen is put to paper. Right. Mr. Balakrishnan, we're talking about what books tell us about modern India. And this is a very interesting concept for you to delve into because you write about Islamic invasion. You have written about the end, or the conclusion of the Delhi Sultanate. You've had 2 volumes out of 5. What do your books tell us about modern India? Is there a connection that you can make?
Actually,
it'd be very interesting to know.
First off, thanks for having me here. It's a very interesting question, actually a fantastic question to raise. Well, Durant once said that, most people spend their entire lives reading about what happened just 24 hours ago and not what happened 6,000 years ago. All those people are pretty much wasting away their lives. So the answers to the present.
How about living in the moment? What happened to living in the moment?
Well, I'm not woke, so you should kind of ask that crowd.
That was just a pun, I'm sorry.
So essentially, history is basically philosophy, teaching through examples. So at its most philosophical level, it is like any other discipline. What it teaches you is about not just failures and wars and invasions and conquests and defeats and things like that, but what are the underlying motivations that, for example, spans a lot of questions, including the rise and fall of civilizations. So when you look at history of the human civilization and various empires in its broadest sense, since the dawn of what is known as human civilization, you will find that the most splendid empire in any part of the world has a maximum shelf life of not more than 300 years across the world, since the dawn of human civilization. So what causes that to kind of, rise? What are the factors that contributes to the rise and its decline and fall? Because there is a peak and then there is a decline. When the decline, as the decline occurs, you don't know it is occurring. But there are some very wise people, the contemporaries, who will alert you that, look, this is not going well. Yet, the civilization, the society as a whole, persist in their folly. So this is philosophy at its most profound sense. So I try to explore various facets using the story of Islamic invasions into India. So this is also, in a way, a philosophical and a human drama in that sense. What happened that once, not just once, for about more than 3,000 years, just a ballpark figure, India was considered as the magnet for what? For wealth, for education, for spirituality, you name it. I'll give one example. The spice trade, or rather the pepper trade in India, led to several wars and built several civilizations in Europe, most notably Italy. There's a beautiful long-form essay in Smithsonian Magazine. You should read that, how the pepper of India built the opulence of Venice and Florence, I think.
I have some knowledge about that.
William
William Dalrymple has written on that.
Yeah, so just the pepper trade, not from all of India, but only from Malabar. So pepper was known in ancient Greek as the sink that drained the gold of Greece. Just for peppers, entire wars were fought for more than 200, 300 years in Europe. So why did this decline? And how did we become, what were the factors that contributed to, these repeated invasions? And in spite of resistance, I don't think any other country in this whole planet has undergone such oppression for such a sustained period. And we are still sitting here and I'm able to tell that tale.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.